Hello guys, welcome to Pydjango-Tutorials. So we have completed our user list functionality in the last video. So now we can just focus on the consumer part and we can complete our consumer at least to send and receive messages through our uh, consumer basically. So we have set up a basic Django consumer. For example, we have set up our ASGI file. We have already set up our routes as well. So in this video, we'll continue with our consumers only. So we already have this connect function. So what we can do is like very similar to WhatsApp clone, we can get the request user is to self dot scope user, and then uh, we can check first if request user dot is authenticated. Self dot scope ID. So this is our chat with user with whom we will be able to chat. So this is our request user, and this is the another user with whom we are going to chat. One thing we can, get the user IDs and that too in sorted order. So we can say like first thing we can do is convert them to int object request user dot id comma int object of chat with user. We can sort this so that these IDs always remain sort. So we can say user ID is equals to sorted user IDs, and then we can create the group name. So self dot room group name equals to chat underscore whatever is the first ID. So user ID is 0 hyphen user ID is index 1. Then we can uh, you know then we can basically and then we can add this connection to our channel layer. So we can set self dot channel layer dot group add self dot room group name and self dot channel name. Then we can accept this connection. So our basic connect function is at least complete. So those of you who haven't watched the WhatsApp clone playlist, let me just brief it out for you guys. That what we are trying to do is get the request user ID and the other user ID with whom we are going to chat. So you can see that we are getting here the request user ID, this, and we are getting the chat user ID. So this is how we get the requested user through our channel layers, and we are sorting them out because we want them these IDs always to be in the similar order, because eventually we are going to create a common group name for these two users, and those group names should remain similar for both the users. So that's why we are doing sorting. So let's say, for example, let's say first user's ID or request user ID is 8 and chat with user ID is 9, then our group will be something like chat underscore 8 hyphen 9. So this is how we will create, and this 8 and 9 will always be in the similar order when sorted. So there's no issue of wrong group name or anything. That's why we have done this. So if you want to learn more, like what is group name and all, then you can check the WhatsApp clone playlist. I've explained there. Now another thing we need to do is uh, create a disconnect function or override a disconnect function. That is what happens when our connection disconnects. So we can say sync def disconnect, and we can simply discard this group from our channel layer. So self dot channel layer dot group discard self dot room group name and self dot channel name. So basically we are saying that remove this group or this group from this channel. That's all we are saying. Now we can focus on the receive function. That is what will happen once we receive something via WebSocket. So we can implement or override the receive function as well. So async def receive, and we can say first get our data. So data equals to JSON. We have to import JSON as well. So import JSON. So we can say JSON dot loads. Then we want to load the text data. Then we can say message equals to I will be, because I know I will be sending a message key, so I can directly access that. Then I need to get the other user ID for saving these messages to the database. But if you want, we can ignore this for now, or we'll do this later only, because right now we are only interested in testing our messages, not saving to the database. Eventually we'll do that as well later on. So now we have our message. We can simply add this to our or send this to our channel layer, or basically basically broadcast this message to our room group name, so that everyone who is connected to that particular room group name should get that particular message. So we can say self dot channel layer dot group send. Then we can say self dot room group name, and we want to give the type is basically a function that will invoke once we receive message. So chat message, and what we want to send, that is this message. So because this message will be invoked, so we have to create this function as well. So what we can do is after our connect, we can create another async function, async def chat message. This will take self comma event, and this event will have all the messages and all. So first thing we'll do is get our message from our event. So message equals to event, sorry, not environment, event message. Then we can say simply await self dot send, and we need to send text data. So we can say text data equals to, and we need to send JSON data as well. So JSON dot dumps, and we can deliver the key as message only. So our consumer is also complete. So that's all we need to do in the consumer. Later on we'll integrate message saving functionality and all. That's fine. We will implement image sending functionality as well. But our basic or core of the consumer is complete. Now we can create a route for this as well. For now our route is static. It's not according to the user with whom we are chatting. So basically you can say that you can see in our consumer that from our URL route we are actually getting the second ID, second user's ID basically. So we need to pass that ID while connecting to our route. So what we can do here, very similar to Django URLs, we can give int ID, and that's all. So our route is also complete. Now one last thing, to access this request user, we need to change one more thing in our ASGI file as well, so that we can access the requested user as well. So let's do that. So in our ASGI file, we need to give auth middleware stack as well, which will basically check for authentication and authorization, whether the requested user is authenticated or not. If not, we will get the authentication error, or we will get basically an anonymous user, not the requested user. So from channels.auth import auth middleware stack, and then what we can do, this we can change this URL router within auth middleware stack, and we are good to go. So now we can test like this if we want, but although this is complete, our consumer is complete, but this will not work now because we are developing our consumer in our Django REST project basically. So we don't have access to this request user or request user dot is authenticated. This should be a bool. There should not be a bracket actually. Yeah. So we don't have access to this request user directly because in Django REST or in any form of REST APIs, authentication is usually after login is done through a token or OAuth 2 basically like this, right? So we have to develop some sort of middleware or some sort of bridge in between which will authenticate request for our channels as well, and set this self.scope to the authenticated user. Or so I'll show you in a minute, but let's just test it out anyway. So we can say WebSocket king. So this is basically our URL. Let's try to connect to this. So you can see after trying for certain number of seconds, our connection got refused. If we look at our terminal, we'll see none type object has no attribute group discard. And so this is basically happening because we are not getting anything from our request user. So if I try to print this request user, this will basically be a anonymous user or something. So if I try to reconnect, then you can see, yes, our user is actually an anonymous user. So we are not able to authenticate or get the requested user, because in normal Django, when you're not developing the REST APIs, authentication is managed through managed through sessions, and here we are managing authentication through bearer token and all. So we need to specifically design authentication for WebSocket request as well. So that's an extra work we need to do, but it's a good practice actually, because in the real world scenario you have to develop REST APIs, then only you can communicate through different projects or different APIs as well. So very first thing we'll do is create a file called middleware channels dot channels middleware dot py. Channels also support middleware. Channels also has a support for middleware as well, so we'll use that. But before that, we need to create a authentication for our tokens, for our WebSockets as well. So what we can do, is in our token authentication, we can create another function here. We can say def authenticate WebSocket, and we can say take self scope token, and very first thing we can do is use JWT to decode it. So we can say G. Then we can verify our token. User ID equals to payload. We can gather our ID from the payload. Then we can say user equals to user.objects.get user ID. Then we can simply return this user. No need to return the token. We can simply return the user. Then we can write accept. We can accept invalid token error. We can exploit expired, and user dot does not exist as well. And we can raise authentication failed invalid token. So our WebSocket is also complete. One thing more. Now this is related to Django channels. We need to do everything asynchronously. So we need to import a decorator because we are making a query here, you can see, and that too we want to make asynchronously. So we can say from channels.db here, from channels.db import database sync to async, and then we can use that decorator here, database sync to async. So our token authentication is complete. Now we can move on to the middleware part and implement middleware for this. So how this will work? So let me show you. Now this is the request we are making, right? So along with this, we will send a query parameter with the name token and then the actual token that we will generate while logging in. And then we will extract this token. We will call this WebSocket consumer function. And once we have the user, we will set our this where self.scope user to the logged in user or to the user whose token is being identified in the URL. So this is the basic overview. You'll understand once we have the code. So what we can say is from channels.middleware, because we will be using middleware, and that too channels middleware, the base middleware. We can say from REST framework dot exceptions import authentication field. Then we can say from Django.db, from Django.db import close all old connections. So this is basically we will use to close all the existing database connections before making the new one. So last thing we'll do from accounts.token authentication import JWT authentication. Now we will create a class JWT web socket middleware. This will be inherited by base middleware. So very first function we'll have is the call function. So or that will be overridden by this base middleware class actually. So we'll set call, and so this will basically have this scope that we are accessing here. This scope. So what we can do is first thing we can do is close old connections. Then we can get the query string. Query string equals to scope dot get query string we have to decode this string. This is decode with UTF-8 encoding. Then we can get all the query parameters actually. So we can say query parameter. This will be a dictionary, and that too with dictionary comprehension for QP in query string dot split, and we have to split through and basically, and from this QP we want to split everything based on equal to. So we are just doing this. If you want to send other parameters as well, you can send those as well. Very first thing we'll do is get our query string. From our query string we will get the individual query parameters using uh, and operator, because you must have seen that query parameters are mostly like question mark and then actual name of the token equal to then value of the token. Then for the next parameter we are using and operator or ampersand, and then the next name of the parameter equals to the next value of the parameter. So first thing we'll doing is by splitting through and we are getting all the parameters. Then within those parameters we are splitting through equal to get the name and the value itself. So we can say token equals to query parameters dot get. Now this is a dictionary, so we can get the value as token or none. So default value will be none. If we don't get anything from our query parameter, we will get none. So if we can say token is none, we can reject our connection. So we can say await send, and this will be type will be WebSocket dot close. So this is automatically called the close function within the channels, and we can send the status as well or code as well. So in this case the code is 4000 actually. So these are some WebSocket terminologies that I'm using. Now if this is not the case, that is if we have the token, then what we can do is authenticate or authentication equals to JWT authentication. We can create the object and we can try to verify our token. So user equals to await authentication, not authentication. Yes, authentication dot authenticate WebSocket, and we need to pass scope and token. So if we will see our token authentication, you can see we need to pass scope and token. Although don't need scope here, but let's send that. Maybe we need it later on. So if user is not none, that we get something in return as a user, we can say scope user equals to user, else we can close the connection here as well. So I can just copy this. We can return await super dot call scope comma receive comma send. That means we can continue with our connection because everything seems to be fine. We can accept authentication failed, and we can say await self dot send type equals to WebSocket dot close, and here we can return the code as 4002. Now this is complete, so our middleware is also complete. So we can move to the testing part. So for testing we need to generate our token, because remember we need to send that now. So what we can do is open a Postman. So in our Postman, very first thing we'll do is try to log in. Our server is running. We can hit the send request and we have our token. So now what we can do is take this token, and in our WebSocket client, we can paste this token here, and then we can try to connect. We still could not connect. So let's see what is the error. Okay, none type object has no attribute discard. So let's fix this and see what is the error. Okay, let's verify what user we are getting. So we are still getting anonymous user. That means our scope is not setting to the logged in user. So yeah, in our WebSocket, what we need to do is from our chat dot channels middleware import JWT WebSocket middleware. So we have to wrap this WebSocket URL within our middleware. So now I think we can get the current user. So let's test this out. So if I hit send, connect, then also same error. So at least we get our user. So remember from Postman, this is the user I've created token for. So at least I'm getting that particular user here. So let's see what is the error actually. Still none type object has no attribute group add. Okay. So basically group add, let's verify our group add. Okay, that means this channel layer does not have attribute group add. So that means we are not getting a channel layer at all. It's none type. So let's verify our settings. Yeah, this should be channel layers actually. Yeah. So that was the typo we have made. So make sure to correct that as well. So now if we go to our WebSocket King and hit the connect button. So now you can see we have connected to our consumer. If we try to send the payload or message, so remember we have to send message as the key, and then we can send the value. So we can say WebSocket test and hit the send. So this is the message we have sent and this is the message we have received. So that's how it is working. If you want to see in this like this in real time, what you can do is log into this WebSocket King and copy this same URL. I don't know why it's not copying actually. Let's refresh this. Yeah, now it's getting copied. So we can paste this URL here as well. And let's connect to this. Let's connect here as well. So you can see that we have nothing here. So if we send this message from here, you can see we have received a message here as well. So you can see that through WebSocket, communications are real time somewhat. Not exactly real time, but somewhat real time. So I have sent this message from this particular client connection or WebSocket connection, and I have received that message here as well. So this is how basically on a very high level chat applications work. So we will, in the next video, we will integrate WebSocket using React.js or in React.js application. And through our React.js application, we will try to send and receive messages and show those messages in our chat area. So this video is already long, so I think it's best to end the video here. We have set up our consumer. Uh, we we have set up our consumer In the next video, we'll integrate how to send messages using our React.js application and authenticating our WebSocket connections as well. Then later on, we'll integrate chat saving functionality and image sending functionality as well. So that's all for this video. So if you have any questions or any query regarding whatever we learned today, or if you didn't understand anything, you can comment in the video and I'll surely help you guys. Also, if you have any suggestion, you can always reach out to me. So having said that, thank you so much for watching once again, and please do like, share and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Thank you so much.